one. Hey, hello, welcome to the FilmFile. Yes, it's the film show for film geeks by film geeks.
Dun, 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 dun,
It's not the same when you don't do the music, Andy.
dun, 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 dun.
Hey, here we are. We're back with another exciting episode of the FilmFile. Of course, I'm Lee Ford.
And of course, I'm Andy Meakin.
Of course.
One
How
of
you
these
been,
days,
Andy?
we'll swap names.
You know what? No one would care this week. What have we got in today's show? Well, where do we start? Of course, Andy will be bringing you the sequence we call the news. We will be doing a deep dive into Martin Scorsese's The Goodfellas. Andy will be reviewing
Films. My main review this week is going to be a film called Panda Bear It, which isn't available in the UK at the moment, but it's a small micro-budget film that I got approached by the director to see whether I wanted to look at a screener, and I watched it, and I've got a lot to say about it.
what more can you say?
I've also got a quick summation of a few of the films that I mentioned last week: Escape from Pretoria, Capone, and People vs. Billie Holiday. Just quick little notes to let you know how I felt about them.
Excellent. So hopefully you're enjoying the show and you're still with us. And if you're enjoying it that much, then please hit the subscribe button and become a regular listener to the FilmFile. And as well as becoming a regular listener, please just take 2 minutes out of your day and leave a review, because boy, do we love reading reviews, especially good ones. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do so at
over on Twitter at FilmFile UK, on Instagram FilmFile UK, or you can email us podcast at filmfile.uk.
There's no reason to not drop us a line. Okay, so this week we are doing our regular deep dive. Last week we did Superman. This week we're doing the 1990 Martin Scorsese classic. And when we use the word classic, it doesn't get any classier than this. Goodfellas. Yep. Starring Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, the story of Henry Hill and his life in the mob, covering his relationship with his wife Karen and his mob partners Jimmy Conway and Tommy DeVito. And this is the epitome of the great Italian-American crime syndicate film. Often imitated, never bettered, and even by Scorsese himself, I don't think he's ever improved upon this, even though he's made some worthy films since then. Andy, I can't believe that it came out in 1990 for a start, and I went to the cinema to see it, and it's a long movie. It's just short of 3 hours, but it never, in any moment of that film, does it feel dull? Does it feel padded? Doesn't it feel like it's moving and building to a satisfactory conclusion? I know it's been talked about as being one of the greatest crime films. I know it's been talked about as being one of the greatest crime films of all time, up there with The Godfather. But in my honest opinion, it surpasses that. It surpasses that for a whole multitude of reasons that we will talk about today. But it's a film that you said if it's on, you just have to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, this is possibly my most rewatched Martin Scorsese film of all time. I was 17 when it got released, just about to turn 18, and I managed to sneak in to see this when it was released, despite the fact it was an 18. I looked quite old for my age. But wow, what a film. It took the style of his earlier films, his Mean Streets kind of approach, where he was melding, street level crime with mobster kind of aesthetics, and his use of music. And it crafted the pinnacle of that theme of film that he did. This, like you say, it's something that's been imitated so many times, including by Scorsese himself, but never bettered. And yeah, I think the closest that he's come to getting the level of cool and the whole buzz and energy of this film was when he gave us Wolf of Wall Street, which is basically Goodfellas with stock market. But one absolute belter of a film. Once it's on, and you'll see that I've got the Blu-ray, I'll happily. I've got the DVD. I've got the old like flip disc DVD from when it first came out. I will happily rewatch it. And whilst there's some films that you'll rewatch and you'll get to a point that when you put it on, it's kind of background noise while you're doing other things. You get distracted. You'll pick up a book and read while you're doing it. As soon as this starts with that opening scene of them in the car, the bumps coming from the truck, and then it does the flash pan straight into his face as he says, "Ever since I was young, I always wanted to be a gangster." And that's it. I'm hooked. I'm in. Even though I know every beat of the film, every moment of the film, I'm stuck with those characters and I don't look away from the screen. And it was a pleasure going back to it this past weekend and revisiting it once more. And really appreciating, because there's revisiting it for fun, but then when I said that we wanted to do this for the show, it was like, well, I'm going to try and see if I can be critical about it. I'm going to try and dissect it. And it's just such a great film. I can't think of a fault from it. I looked to see if there was anything that stood out as a flaw, and I couldn't see any flaws throughout my whole watching of it.
It's an absolutely epic
What
film,
a great
isn't it?
film.
And it, you know, I failed to mention, while talking about great performances, De Niro, Liotta, and Pesci, but Lorraine Bracco as Karen, the wife figure, and Paul Savino. The fact that it's set between 1955 and 1980, so you've got this change of styles, and the music accompanies that, and the image of the film changes to take it into the 80s. There, there for me is a filmmaker working at the top of his game. I mean, up until that point, he'd had so many home runs: Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, King of New York, and then this. But to some degree, everything that sort of followed this almost paled by comparison to Goodfellas. I mean, we said before we came on, we talked how good Casino is, but it's not as good as Goodfellas. We talked about Gangs of New York, but it's not as good as Goodfellas. Uh, to some extent, this is the film which will be forever Scorsese's signature.
Yes. The music, the use of music in this film and his love of the Rolling Stones is all over this film. But it's everything from the use of Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals in one of the most iconic moments of the film, which I'll talk about a bit more when we talk about the cinematography. Right through to the use of the coda of Layla.
Yeah.
As all the bodies are being found. And it's not just using music just to set the era that it's set in. It's using music as part of the character of the film, and every bit of music, the same as you see with directors such as James Gunn and Edgar Wright, that they use pop tunes and tunes of an era as part of the story. And it's this that Scorsese set the bar level for. Every bit of music doesn't feel like it's been shoehorned in. It feels a natural part of what's happening at that point of the film. Absolutely caught up with it. And as soon as I finished watching it, I went straight onto my computer and started up listening to the soundtrack, because I was back in that world. You've said about the performances, and like you say, Jimmy Conway, Jimmy Conway played by De Niro, Tommy played by Pesci. Brilliant performances. Liotta has never been better
I agree.
than he was
Totally
in this film as Henry Hill. He was absolutely convincing. And the film never lets you forget that these are inherently bad people. But you still find yourself rooting for them. You still want them to succeed in their criminal acts. And that's the masterful element of this story. And it's a true story. And that's what makes it stand out more. But like you said, people always talk about the performances in this, but they kind of forget how great Lorraine Bracco is as Karen Hill. She is absolutely fiery. She is dominating in scenes, and she is an essential presence throughout, because she is the linchpin of an almost normality that Henry Hill was hanging on to whilst his life was devolving around him.
You can't go and talk about Goodfellas without talking about so many different iconic scenes. There's the entering of the club, the one long take, which is absolutely superb. You've got the So You Think I'm Funny, Joe Pesci. There are so many classic moments that to come out of one film is amazing. You know, you'd expect those to come out of several films. And you can go on and on. You talk about the music, you talk about the design of the film, you talk about the sense of threat that runs all the way through the story. Just it's everything about it is why the term classic was invented for. It is one of those utterly quotable films. There's not anybody who's a film fan who can't quote some part of Goodfellas. You know, there's the fact that the the ease of the characters and the way they relate to each other is so beautiful, and that's down to the fact that Scorsese in rehearsals had lived a lot of the scenes, then wrote them into the script. So you got that sense of spontaneity. These are actors working at the top of their game. A director, these are actors working at the top of their game, along with a director working at the top of his game. And without this film, you wouldn't have got a series like The Sopranos. And of course, there were so many cast members who made it into the Sopranos, but it birthed other films, and it's so referenced.
The combination of direction from Scorsese with cinematography by Michael Balehouse gave us some beautifully shot scenes. The nighttime scenes are always lit in what looks like a natural way, so it doesn't look like it's artificially lit, but you never fail to be able to see the detail in it. It's so well shot. And like you say, that Copacabana scene, the single take shot, which came about through necessity. Initially, they wanted to film just going in through the main doors and straight in there, but they weren't allowed to film the front of the Copa. And so they went, well, let's go in through the back and do a single take. And it took 14 takes of getting that right. And you watch it, and we've said before on a few other things when we've spoken about single takes that we do love a good single take. It's something that there's the technical achievement behind it, but it's also, it really draws you into the moment. And this is a perfect single take. There's so much activity going on. When it goes through the kitchens, there's so much that must have been choreographed to perfection to get that to flow like it did. But never once do you feel that there's a cameraman following them, because you don't get the judder that you get quite frequently when you're following someone with a camera. It is smooth. It is fluid. There's no cuts. It is straight from the outside, through all the back passages, round the kitchens, out into the main hall, to the front, to the stage, table down, sat down, and that's when it goes static and it focuses on them. Absolutely brilliant. 14 takes. If I tried doing that, I'd still be doing it now. I'd still be going for it on take 4,973. It shows how meticulous Scorsese could be, and the fact that they had to do this because they couldn't go with their initial plan of just going in through the front doors. What an achievement to make the most memorable moment out of a film from something that you were forced to do out of necessity.
And you know what? The reason it really does work is because it's integral to the story. It's not because it's a flashy setup. It works because it works in tandem with the rest of the story and the world of that character, and that character having to come through the back door, the character having to go through the kitchens, and almost that descent into hell. It works because it's so thematic of the rest of the film. I'm just going to have to get my power because I'm draining power like I'm going out of business.
Okay.
Right. So.
Yeah, the whole sequence, like you say, it's part of it, and it is romancing of Karen, that moment. And by the end of that whole walkthrough and sitting down at the table, we are as whirled in the head, and we are as enthralled and captivated by the presence that he has in this society around them, that we can understand how she just looks at him going, what is it you do? And you can understand how she was just enraptured by him from that moment, because we are as well. Absolutely brilliant. I've just double checked, and it wasn't 14 takes. It was 8. 8 takes it took to shoot it. The 14 apparently was the walkthroughs without shooting to try to get things right and planning things. And then they actually just went rolling, and it's only 8 times that it took them to get the version that made the cut. What a shot.
And what a film. And it's it's one of those films where, as you said very early on, you are caught up in this incredible world of violence, and Scorsese never shies away from that. And you're caught up with characters who you would never want to meet or even be in that world if you're a sensible, moralistic human being. But you're sharing over 2 hours of just superb filmmaking and superb characters. It is and deserves to be recognized as one of the greatest films ever made, and it's not often you can say that. This is Scorsese's absolute triumph of a film.
It's because of films such as Goodfellas that when Scorsese says a piece that causes controversy, like is it cinema, etc., that you just go, you know what, even if I don't agree entirely with you, you deserve to have a voice. He has shown his passion for films through making such a momentous film. So this is why Scorsese is possibly the biggest influence on film of our generation.
Here, I second that all the way through. So there you go. That's Goodfellas. We'll take another deep dive next week. But in the meantime, because I've been, slightly lazy, Andy's got some reviews for you. He's had an opportunity, for some reason I haven't, to watch as much as possible and let you know his thoughts across the streaming platforms. So, Andy, what have you got for us this week?
So my main review this week is a film that a director got in touch with me to see whether I wanted to see his film, to do a review for, give some feedback for. And it's a micro-budget film by a writer-director called Evan Kidd, and it's called Panda Bear It. And there is a trailer online that I can snag, which I can slot in there. So this is Evan Kidd's second feature after Son of Clowns, and it's only a short film, just over an hour long. Panda Bear It sees Damien Elliott Bynum. Start that again. Panda Bear It sees Damien Elliott Bynum, aka Camus Leonardo, a rapper who is struggling to regain his inspiration for not only his art, but his day job and life in general. Oh, and he's also followed at times by an imaginary panda. However, what initially looks like just a melancholy is revealed to be depression brought about by grief after the loss of the love of his life a year earlier. Oh, and did I mention that he's being followed by an imaginary panda? The significance of this imaginary panda that seems very out of place and very surreal at the start of the film starts to become integral to the journey of Camus over the short running time. Now, this is a film that I found easy to connect with on quite a few levels. There's the exploration of grief and loss, which is something that most of us can relate to in one way or the other. The lead role is played in a very natural, subdued and melancholic manner that feels real. It doesn't feel forced, it feels believable. And the believability of that role is one of the biggest strengths of the film. It helps us overlook the somewhat weaker cast members around him at times in support roles. It's not to say they're bad, and indeed there's one in particular, that of a farmer later on in the film, played by Eric Hartley, that really stands tall. But the rest of the cast are generally okay, but sometimes feel a little stagey in their performances, lacking the natural feel that was intended, because this is a micro-budget film. It cost $500 to make, so it was amateur actors who were roped in to do it. And you can see the amateur dramatics at times, but it never takes away from that central, believable role, and that's the important aspect. But what impressed me out of the gate on this film was the confidence in cinematography shown. Now, the director, Evan Kidd, did everything. He wrote it, he directed it, he was responsible for camera work. It's all his work. And he uses a really good selection of framing and shot setups, avoiding the usual approach that small indie films tend to adopt, where they just dump a camera down and people act in front of it. He uses creative positioning of the camera for the best impact of the mood of each scene. There's things like when he's laid on the couch, he doesn't show him from the side, sprawled on the couch watching TV. It's shot from above him to really show his complete apathy to life around him. There's subtle, surreal humour in there, largely involving the panda, which is well placed and never feels like it's contrasting with the themes of the film. Some interesting creative choices help to highlight that the panda isn't real and nobody else is aware of its presence. The choice to have the panda not speak as such, but it makes curious squeak mumbles, with the translation then shown in subtitles, puts its words in our heads so that we can relate to how the panda is in Camus's head. But most of all, this is a film that taps into the surreality of grief itself, how the world feels unreal when you're locked in grief, and nothing can break you out of it. And it's the panda of unreality who's trying to break him out of it. And it's how our experiences with grief can sometimes disconnect us from our own reality, sometimes requiring that outside presence, real or unreal, to move us forward once more. From watching this film, this is his only second film. Evan Kidd shows remarkable promise as a creative force, and is certainly going to be a name that I'm going to be looking out for in future. Is it a top marks film? No, it's a solid 3-star film, 3 out of 5. It's got so much potential in there. It's got so many interesting ideas. The low budget obviously cheapens it at moments, but you do wonder after watching it what you could achieve with a larger budget. Now, I need to point out that this film is not available as of yet in the UK. It's on Amazon Prime in the US. And I've spoken to Evan, and he's looking to get a distribution in the UK later in the year. But in the meantime, if anyone wants to track this down, for a total of a $5 donation to his Patreon account, which we'll put the link in the description, but it's patreon.com/Mr. Evan Kidd, EvanKidd. That will get you access to this film and also his first film, Son of Clowns. $5. It's about £3.70 at the moment. Streaming distribution, like I say, is planned for later this year. But I think this is an interesting short film that showcases fresh, upcoming talent in quite a good way.
Excellent. So if you want to watch that film, then just check in the descriptions this week and we'll be able to point you in the right direction.